if Tennessee does not win the national championship, we're not just talking about winning a game or getting in. They're in. And I believe they have every opportunity to win a college football championship because Nico Iamaleava has really come along, and Caleb wrote about that on Off the Hook Sports. But, Caleb, let me ask you this. If they don't, what will ultimately be the Vols' undoing?
It'll be a few things, and I know where you're going with this. So I'm gonna let you go with it where you're gonna go. But I will say, if they don't get a home game, playing on the road in the first round could be their undoing because this offense just sputters on the road. That has been Josh Heupel's Achilles heel the whole time. That's part of their undoing. Questions surrounding the offensive tackles and the receivers' ability to get separation could be their undoing. And yes, middle linebacker play would be their undoing.
That's where I'm going. Call them about that on Off the Hook Sports if you can drop that in the chat. Here's what I believe about Jeremiah Telander. And I'm not pointing the finger at any one player, but I believe he is going to be an all-SEC type of player. I think he's fiery. I think he's smart, but I think he's young. And I think he's out of position at times. And I think that ultimately will be Tennessee's Achilles heel if they don't win a national championship. And Caleb, when I look at Telander, if I just said, oh, here's this sophomore and he's playing at the level he is, I'd say, well, Tennessee's done a pretty good job of getting that guy. But Keenan Pili was special. I'm not going to use the Al Wilson comparison because Al's Al. But when you look at a middle linebacker that's incredibly fiery, that had his guys in the right position, I think there's a marked difference with Telander and Pili and the way the defenses have performed. So your thoughts on Keenan Pili and the fact that he's out, obviously, with the ACL injury that was ironically suffered against the University of Florida. So we could well be having the conversation, Caleb, that Tennessee didn't win a national championship because of the Florida game, which they won, but that's when Pili got hurt. I think that's a big issue. Now, on our message board, we already see Hurd getting multiple offsides. That could be a problem. And No Bueno's calling me out, said he had 2 tackles at Georgia. He won't be all SEC, in my opinion. Fair. I think he's gotten himself out of position. I don't think he was ready for the likes of Georgia. The idea was to bring him along for next year. So, Caleb, how big's the fall off between Keenan Pili to Jeremiah Telander?
Oh, it's big. And I didn't think it was when the Florida game happened. And you called this, Dave, because I watched it and I said, I thought Jeremiah Telander played okay. And then I thought he played okay against Alabama. But then there were clearly some adjustments made that other teams made that I didn't notice because ever since then, he's really struggled at staying in position. He's been even when the defense has been at its best, you have seen teams move the ball at times. Now, many of you guys will say last week doesn't count because Vanderbilt, their 2 touchdowns were a kickoff return and off a fumble. And then their only other touchdown was in garbage time when Tennessee was trying to work the clock. That's true. But Dave, you watched the first and a half quarter of that game too, I'm sure. You probably noticed Vanderbilt was moving the ball on their misdirection run plays a decent bit.
They were.
And yeah. And that has everything to do with Jeremiah Telander. And you're right, Keenan Pili being out was a huge loss. It's kind of interesting because Florida obviously got hurt at quarterback in that game against Tennessee. Florida got hurt at quarterback and Keenan Pili got hurt at linebacker. You wonder which one was more devastating in that game, quite honestly.
No, true. And you can debate on the message board if you like. I think Telander is going to end up being a very good player. I think it's important to point out that his dad was a college football coach, for those that don't know. So I think he knows the game at a high level. But I just think there are certain situations you put yourself in. I think Al Wilson would probably say this, that as a sophomore, he was nowhere close to where he was as a junior or a senior. I think every linebacker would say that comes along. And you've got to know the defense inside and out. You've got to know what the left end's doing. You've got to know what the right defensive tackle's doing. You've got to know all that because Tim Banks loves to use a variety of stunts, twists, and blitzes that I think Arian Carter is handling some of the play calling there and some of the alignment, but ultimately that needs to fall on the middle linebacker. And I just don't think that right now Telander's at that level. Could change soon, but I don't think he's at that level now.
He's not. And Dave, when you were off last week, we had John Adams on, and he actually talked about, playing middle linebacker. The only thing that's concerning, and I kind of agree with John on this, you've seen this before. You saw Tennessee try to do it with Leonard Little. You saw LSU try to do it with Harold Perkins. There seems to be a belief among coaches that you can coach playing middle linebacker. But just tell me honestly, isn't it more instinctual, kind of just knowing to go where the ball is than anything else?
Yes, because you've got the whole field to worry about. So if you're an outside linebacker, it's a lot easier, and you don't have as many issues there. So I think it's instinctual, kind of like running back. But I've seen enough from Telander. You tell me if you agree that I believe he can be that type of middle linebacker. I just think that's asking a lot out of a guy that's just a sophomore.
I could see that. I've seen enough too. Maybe it is right now. So you would say there is still a combination of, even if you have instincts, you still have to learn the defense to a certain degree, and you have to get used to. You have to develop some.
Yes, and I don't think he also has this year 3 fumble recoveries, 1 tackle for a loss. That's not really impressive, but the 3 fumble recoveries, I think he instinctually knows how to get to the ball. I just think there's probably 10 to 20% of the time where he's making the wrong read. Again, we're talking about you having to play at a level to win a national championship, not to play at a level to blow out Kent State. There's a big difference between the two.
Right. And so, I guess that's where I was at, because when I think middle linebacker, here's the first person that comes to mind. It's not Al Wilson, because I was way too young at that time. I did not know he switched from outside linebacker to middle linebacker his senior year, but he is a good example. But the one I saw is Gerard Mayo switching from outside linebacker to middle linebacker. And it just, he just seemed like he naturally was meant to play middle linebacker. It didn't seem like there was a learning curve at all for him.
Yeah, but here's the other thing about him. He's just so incredibly intelligent that he was able to rise up the ranks and be an NFL coach. So that's easy for me to say, NFL coach. So I think that's a factor as well. Now, the other thing that you need to watch with Telander, and the reason that he can be a reason why Tennessee wins a national championship instead of not, is coming up. Let me tell you, today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com.
What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Warren asking you to like, subscribe, and share. Dave needs this.
Jacob, coming up. The reason that Telander can be a pro and not a con for Tennessee coming down the stretch is that he's got time. He's got time to get better. And with bye weeks, that I know that you can't prepare for an opponent because you don't know who the opponent's going to be with this week, but you will have so December, the games this weekend will be the 6th. So you'll know who you're going to play. You'll have an extra week of time. So I think that really helps Jeremiah Telander as well, and the entire team. And I do think he keeps playing a little bit better. Not any dramatic jump, but a little bit better. Caleb, I'll let you have the last word on Jeremiah Telander before we get to one of your crazy takes.
Well, maybe Telander, maybe the 3 weeks off will help him. Maybe playing against this offense 3 more weeks will help him. I will say this: it's looking like Tennessee will play Ohio State in the first round. Whatever you think of Ryan Day and his coaching, the Urban Meyer spread offense is one of the hardest things for a young linebacker to try to figure out, isn't it? Which is kind of scary for Tennessee. That's something you can exploit big time.
Yeah, and you got to remember, you give up 3 or 4 key plays, and that can be the difference.